Ed and his friend Mike embarked on a terrifying adventure in an old and desolate hotel. This hotel, located just outside the town, had been abandoned and forgotten for many years. It was infamous among the locals as the Hotel of Death. One night, their curiosity drew them to this dark and horrifying place. When they arrived at the front of the hotel, the sky was covered with clouds, and the wind sang a mournful tune. They stood in front of the door, exchanged nervous glances, and then entered. The corridors appeared in dim light. The walls were covered with old paintings, each one seeming to tell the stories of the ghosts of those who had once lived here. Ed and Mike climbed the stairs and arrived at a room on the upper floor. The room was so cold that both of them were shivering. Suddenly, the hotel's electricity went out, and everything was shrouded in darkness. They frantically turned on their flashlights and clung to each other. Strange sounds began to emanate from inside the hotel. Footsteps, whispers, and the sound of dragging chains could be heard. Ed and Mike, their eyes fixed on the door, held their breaths in fear. Suddenly, they heard a scream that filled the room. It came from right behind the door, and it sent chills down their spines. They turned off their flashlights and tried to move forward, but they got lost in the darkness. Out of nowhere, a hand touched Ed's shoulder. He turned around with a scream, but he couldn't see anything. He only felt a cold breath. He whispered Mike's name, but received no response. In the dark and silence, Eddie became lost in the huddle. As time passed, the shadows of strange entities appeared in the rooms. Sometimes they sang mournful songs, and other times they screamed. Ed tried to find his friend, but with every step, he was pulled deeper into the unknown. When daylight finally broke, Ed managed to escape from the hotel, but he couldn't find Mike. He couldn't decipher the mystery of his friend's disappearance. Harry and his friends decided to venture into a remote mountain cabin for an extended vacation. This cabin was nestled deep in the dark woods outside of town, and it had been untouched for years. There were eerie tales circulating about the cabin in the town. And Harry and his friends were filled with curiosity. As they arrived at the cabin, the sky rapidly darkened. The cabin was old and neglected. The door creaked open with an eerie sound as they stepped inside. It was cold inside, with peeling wallpaper covering the walls. Harry and his friends began exploring the abandoned belongings left behind by a family who had abandoned the cabin years ago. However, something was amiss. There was still a lingering scent of a freshly cooked meal in the air, as if someone had prepared it here not too long ago. That night, as they were having dinner, strange sounds filled the room. Footsteps and whispers seemed to echo throughout the cabin. Harry and his friends were frightened, but they mustered their courage and decided to investigate the source of the noises. As they roamed through the cabin, they entered a room and found an old, rusty mirror. The mirror was ancient and weathered, but the reflections it showed were strange and unsettling. Harry and his friends realized that the reflections in the mirror weren't their own. Instead, it displayed the faces and eyes of the deceased. Terrified, they rushed out of the room and out of the cabin. Outside, they discovered an old graveyard surrounding the cabin. The tombstones bore inscriptions, and these inscriptions matched the names in the eerie mirror. In fear, they returned to the cabin, and inside, the strange sounds had intensified. Shadows seemed to detach from the walls, and they swayed eerily. Harry and his friends felt lost within the cabin's darkness, and they began to run blindly. In their frantic flight, they somehow found themselves back in the graveyard. Finally, they stumbled upon a particular grave. Harry and his friends frantically started digging, and inside the grave, they discovered a corpse. It was the former owner of the cabin, the one whose face was reflected in the old mirror. They fled in terror and never returned. The mountain cabin and the graveyard remain shrouded in an enigmatic mystery, still a part of the town's terrifying lore. And that's where Harry's chilling adventure comes to an end.